the agenda for the 1 hour webinar. That's a seminar that you render online on the web. Is what I've just displayed. 2 minutes for my welcome. We have 35 minutes. It can be more, but you see, we only have 1 hour for Duncan Ross to present. And as you will see, Duncan is a great presenter. He's a great leader in the ranking business. So he will run it for 35 minutes, and then we're going to have a question and answer session for 20 minutes. Let me apologize early that we may not be able to take all your questions and answers. We'll only be able to take questions that can fit into the 20-minute provisioned in this agenda. All the other questions I will harvest and send to Duncan. Then we're going to have closing remarks. I'm glad to let Duncan know that in the room today, we have vice chancellors from Nigerian universities. We have the head of quality assurance from Malawi. We also have the head of, she's not the head of quality assurance. She's the head of the National Commission for Higher Education. All the higher education institutions in Malawi are under her command, under her charge. And then we have the same for Burundi. For Nigeria, we have vice chancellors, deputy vice chancellors, directors of academic planning, professors in different disciplines. And this event is hosted by the Nigerian University System Ranking Advisory Committee that is set up by the federal government of Nigeria through the National Universities Commission. Of course, we have members of NURAC here. That's the Nigeria Universities Ranking Advisory Committee. Our secretary, who is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission, Professor Salu, is also here. My 2 minutes have expired, and I have the pleasure of inviting Duncan Ross to make a presentation at this seminar, and then we'll have questions and answers thereafter. Duncan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Peter. Just checking that, yes, my microphone is on. Can I start by thanking you all for attending today? This is a truly a hugely impressive and erudite group that I'm speaking to, and I must admit that it's making me somewhat nervous. This is like going back to university myself, to so many professors in the audience judging me for my work, my homework. I think it's really important that we at Times Higher Education make sure that we are always open to having our rankings reviewed and critiqued and really evaluated by universities around the world. And we're particularly indebted to Peter for pulling together a group of universities from Nigeria and from broader Sub-Saharan Africa. Sorry, it's the afternoon here and I'm already tongue-tied. So I've only got 35 minutes, so I'm going to try to get through as many of my slides as I can. We will make sure that these slides are made available to you after the meeting, so I will send them on to Peter, and Peter, you can distribute those to everyone.
Thank you.
So today I'm going to look at the three major sets of rankings that we have that relates to education across Africa. The first ranking is, of course, the World University Ranking. We have just released a new edition of that, and we have introduced some new metrics there. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about what we're trying to achieve there, and also look at some of the insights we gain from the analysis of the data. I'm also going to look, though, at the impact rankings. So I'm not going to spend long on the impact rankings, but I do want to talk briefly about why we think they're important, and particularly why we think universities in Africa have a key role to play in terms of sustainability. And I will briefly touch on another of our new initiatives, the Sub-Saharan African University Rankings. But we do tend to think of our rankings in these three distinct groups. So we have rankings like the World University Rankings that are very much focused on the traditional research. The traditional.
I'm so sorry. Can we mute our microphones, please? I'm sorry. Please carry on, Duncan.
It's quite all right. So the World University Rankings focus on the research-intensive institutions. The impact rankings have a very different focus. They look at universities from the lens of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And then finally, we have rankings that look at the teaching mission as well. So jumping straight into the World University Rankings, it's quite a complex beast. What it's trying to do is take data from three distinct sources. So we get data directly from universities, and we do require universities to actively want to participate. I'll talk a little bit more about participation later on. But roughly a third of the data comes directly from universities. A third comes from a survey of academics around the world, and another third roughly comes from bibliometric data. From those data sources, we build up 17 distinct metrics. And we group those into 5 broad areas. Those areas are teaching from the perspective of research. How does teaching support research? We look at the research environment. So the resources you have to ensure good research. We look at measures of research quality, so an output of research. We also look at the relationship between universities and industry, and we look at how international universities are. Now, most of these metrics have been around for some time. So we started to build this ranking out in 2004. We adapted it in 2010. But this year, we have introduced 4 new measures. These give us a broader explanation and understanding of research quality. And they also help us to dig deeper into those links with industry. Now, a little bit more about the overall ranking. So this is a huge data exercise. This year, 2,673 universities provided data to the rankings from 127 different countries or territories. Of those 2,673 universities, 1,904 reached the ranking criteria. The bibliometrics that were used, 16.5 million different research papers, which we take from our bibliometric partners, Elsevier. So we use the Elsevier Scopus database. And a great question to ask later on, if you're interested, is why Elsevier, why not Web of Science, or why not OpenAlex or Google Scholar? In terms of the data we collect from universities, we have over 400,000 individual values. And interestingly, or at least interesting to me, is that we don't just take that data at face value. We actually take that data and we explore to see how consistent that is, both within a country, within a university's previous submissions. And when we see inconsistencies, or where we see that the data has moved a lot, we will reach out to your university for clarification. This year, over 34,000 queries, either generated by our own team or generated by universities, were answered by our data team. Now, that, of course, is really important to us. When a university chooses to participate in the rankings, we shouldn't assume it's an exam. You don't have to go and sit in a drafty sports hall in your campus in silence and answer the questions. It's an interactive process. As you go through, if you have any questions for us about what we're trying to measure, we strongly encourage you to reach out, and we will do our best to give you answers on that. The third part of the ranking data, the academic survey, we have significantly expanded the reach of this survey over the last few years. We've gone from roughly 20,000 respondents in a single ranking to now 68,000 respondents. And that represents votes, over 944,000 votes from 166 countries. When it comes to that reputation survey, one of the important things to us is we do balance that by geography. So we use data from UNESCO to understand the number of researchers in each country, and we make sure that our response profile matches those numbers. The number of universities in the rankings has continued to grow over the years. So you can see that when we started in 2016, when we started the current set of methodology in 2016, we only had just over 800 universities in the ranking. We now have more than twice as many universities in the ranking. And this is one of the reasons why we decided to change the methodology this year. As the number of universities has grown, and as the geography of those universities has changed, we felt we needed to change the methodology to better reflect the world of higher education. Because there is no doubt that gradually over time, the center of gravity of the world of research is shifting. It is moving away from the US, it is moving away from Western Europe, from Canada and Australia, and it is moving to a younger world where we see these new universities coming through. And in terms of Nigeria, we can see again a similar growth from a much smaller base. Back in 2018, there were only 3 Nigerian universities in the World University Rankings. We're now up to 15. In terms of the impact rankings, which started in 2019, we are up to 11 Nigerian universities. So the growth there is critical on both sides. Now, I did say that I would spend a little bit of time talking about some of the changes we've made. And then later on, we'll look at some of the data and what that tells us about higher education, both in Africa and in Nigeria. Now, one of the key ways that research quality is typically measured is using an assessment of the number of citations that publications receive. And we see this both in the assessment of individual academics. You're probably all familiar with measures such as H-index, but we can also do similar or have similar approaches for whole universities. Now, when measuring the quality of research for an entire university, one of the things we need to recognize, of course, is that different types of research in different subjects have very different citation profiles. We can't simply compare the number of citations that a publication in medicine gets with the number of citations that a publication in economics gets, because the two are not directly comparable. And so one of the ways we use to try and make the comparison fair is a measurement called field-weighted citation impact. And this has been the core measurement approach we've used for a number of years. The essence is very simple. We say we want to group similar publications together, and we look at the type of publication. So whether this is a research paper, whether it is a conference proceeding, a book chapter, or a review. We look at the year in which the publication took place, because obviously the longer ago you published, the more time your research has to gather citations. And finally, we look at the subject in which you publish. We use up to 344 discrete subject areas. That gives us a 3-dimensional matrix, and within each of the cells in that matrix, we can look at the average number of citations that are received and simply compare the number of citations for a specific publication to that average. This means that a field-weighted citation impact of 1 is absolutely average. Above 1 is very strong, below 1 is lower than average. But when we look at this across a university, we come across a challenge, which is that there are a few publications in every university that score very, very strongly on field-weighted citation impact. This is real data from a university in East Asia, and we can see that although most publications will get a field-weighted citation of 0, 1, maybe 1.5 to 2, there are a small number of publications with a field-weighted citation impact in the hundreds. And this means that when we take an average, things are distorted by those small number of exceptionally strong papers. When we take the log scale of that same graph, this is the picture we see. So we can see for this university, roughly 20% of their publications receive no citations, but a small number at the far right-hand side receive very high numbers of citations. And so this is one of the reasons why we have looked to adjust our measures of research quality. We are keeping the current FWCI measure. That's one of the measures that we do want there, but we're introducing 3 new measures to sit alongside it. So citation impact stays there, the mean field-weighted citation impact for your university. But alongside that, we now add a new measure of typical research. So this is looking at the 75th percentile of the field-weighted citation impact. It's a bit like using the median rather than the average. We think that's going to give us a more robust and more consistent measure over time. But field-weighted citation impact and research strength are both looking at typical research. That's not the only thing we're interested in. We're also interested in research excellence. How many of your papers are truly leading the way in their particular subjects? And so our third citation measure does that. It looks at the proportion of your publications in the top 10% of publications by field-weighted citation impact. It normalizes this by your staff numbers, so we are able to actually fairly compare universities of different sizes. Now, our fourth research quality metric is a little bit different, because all of the previous measures assume that all citations are equal. That if I cite Peter, then that citation is equally valuable than if Peter cites me. And of course, that's not the case. My citation isn't worth very much at all, whereas Peter's citation is really important. So wouldn't it be nice if we had a metric that actually took account of the different importance of publications and was able to allocate different strengths to citations based on how important the publication they were published in was? The difficulty is that we have to define what is meant by important papers. But if I highlight what I mean, here's a good example of two different papers, each of which has 3 direct citations. The one on the left and the one on the right both have 3 citations, and in our traditional count, they would look the same. But in reality, the publication on the left clearly is having more influence, because the research that is being cited is then in that chain of research that goes out and informs research much more broadly. And that's really what we're trying to understand here. So just to be clear, this is how this works. Research influence, this new metric, looks at the network of citations to understand the impact they're having on the world. And it does this using an approach that is very similar to Google's PageRank algorithm. So those of us on the call who are slightly older and remember how Google used to do this, essentially they said that the importance of a website depends on how important the websites that link to it are. Here we're doing the same thing, but for publications. The importance of a publication depends on how important the publications that cite it are. That is a circular problem, but we can use a computer science approach to iterate to get to that answer. And it gives us a very different insight into the quality of the research your universities are generating. 2 more things I do want to measure in terms of changes. So the changes to the way that we look at connection between universities and industry. Previously, we've used simply a measure of the proportion of your income that comes from, proportion of your research income that comes from commerce and industry. But now we've also added this measure of patents. It's not the patents that your university holds, because we recognize that different universities have different policies on that. Instead, it is when patents cite your research. So if a patent is owned by Elon Musk, but it cites the work that is done by Lagos State University, then Lagos State University gets the credit for that. Again, this metric is subject weighted. We need to do that because not all subjects are equal in terms of the number of patents. And it is normalized again by staff numbers to take account of the different sizes of universities. And the final change that we brought in for this year is a way of adjusting for the different sizes of countries. So one of the difficulties we have is that we do believe that the work that universities do on the international stage is important, what we call international outlook. We measure this in 3 different ways: the proportion of your publications that are co-authored with someone from outside your home country. We look at the proportion of your students who come from outside your home country, and we look at the proportion of your staff who come from outside your own country. But of course, not all countries are the same size. And it's particularly the case that very small countries like Luxembourg, for example, or Qatar, which only have one major research university, have an unfair, well, it's not unfair, they have a clear advantage for these metrics. If you're the only research university in your country, any co-authorship you do is bound to be with someone outside the country. So we've now introduced a new way of normalizing these metrics that takes into account the size of a country based on its population. So if someone comes from the very north of Nigeria to the south of Nigeria to study, coming from a different cultural background, perhaps speaking different languages, then we give some more recognition to the fact that Nigeria is a big country with diverse culture, and we recognize that more in the metrics. It's not a huge change. It doesn't radically change the scores, but it does give a slightly fairer look at these international measures. So what do we see in the data? That's the changes. That's all very well, but what do we see when we look at the data? Now, the first thing to notice is that the number of universities participating has, of course, grown. We're delighted that more universities from Africa are choosing to participate in the rankings, but we also recognize that at Times Higher Education, we have much more work to do to demonstrate to African universities how they can participate and why participation may be good for them. And that's a job that we have to undertake, and we have to undertake very seriously. Nevertheless, we are pleased to see that those numbers are growing over time. In fact, if we look at Africa as a whole, we can see that the number of universities participating has grown from 48 in 2018 to more than double that in 2023. Although, as I emphasized, we still have a long way to go. The top ranked university in Africa is the University of Cape Town, which is ranked 167th this year. Now, remember, we will be sending you a copy of these slides so you can look at them in detail later on. But this slide is designed to show how African universities compare to the world, to universities across the rest of the world for each of the 17 different metrics. So here I'm using box and whisker plots, and a box and whisker plot gives you an idea of a distribution. There are a couple of things you should note, and I'm just going to look at citation impact here, this light purple measure in the middle. Firstly, for each of the metrics, we have two plots. The one on the left are the scores from African universities, and the one on the right are the scores from universities in the rest of the world. The first thing we should always do is look at the median value, which is the line in the middle. And here we can see that the median value for citation impact for African universities is only very slightly below the world as a whole. So that's actually quite a strong result. The next thing we can look at is the box. That represents the middle part of the distribution. So most universities are going to be sitting in that range there. And again, that's fairly comparable to the world as a whole. And finally, we look at the whiskers, the long tails at the top and at the bottom. These are the very strongest performing universities and the weakest performing universities. Now, the really positive news for Africa is that for this metric and for many others, the strongest performing universities in Africa are absolutely comparable with the strongest performing universities in the world. Now let's look at some of the areas where there are clear strengths for African universities and some of the areas where there are greater challenges. It won't surprise you that one of the areas where we see challenges is in terms of institutional income. Now, for all our income measures, we are normalizing this using purchase price parity. So it is trying to take account for the different economic conditions of different countries. But we can still see that across Africa, there is a significant financial gap when compared to the rest of the world. That's true both for overall institutional income, for research income, and indeed for income from industry and commerce. Now, when it comes to the international measures, we see that, interestingly, international co-authorship is a particular strength of African universities, that actually you are working very strongly outside your home countries or coordinating with other universities outside your home countries. And that has a positive long-term impact on your research, because one of the things that we see time and time again is that the greater the strength of international co-authorship, in the long term, that supports citation performance. Now, in terms of the 3 new citation measures, these are slightly weaker for African universities than for universities across the world as a whole. And it does suggest that the research you're doing is finding it harder to get into the very top areas of research quality, and also that the networks that are coming out of Africa aren't as strong as we might like. Now, I'm going to tell you a very similar exercise here, but instead of comparing Africa and the world, I'm now comparing Nigeria with Africa. So here we see a slightly different picture. We will see the same strengths and weaknesses overall as we see within Africa, but there are 1 or 2 differences. One of the positive differences is that Nigerian universities are outperforming other African universities in terms of the production of people with doctorates. So you're able to support that early stage of research careers strongly, and that's a great thing to see. We can see that the income, the institutional income and research income, the medians are fairly close to Africa as a whole. But when it comes to our research measures, we do see our research quality measures, we see quite a distinct picture. Whereas with African universities as a whole, typical research was strong, it was comparable with the world, and the network research was slightly lower. In the case of Nigerian universities, we see a slightly different pattern. Your typical research isn't performing as strongly as other African universities, but your research influence is a little bit stronger. So it tells me that there's a slightly different pattern of research taking place within Nigeria than we see elsewhere in the continent. Now, all of this is really interesting to me. But one of the things that is notable this year is that overall the score for Nigerian universities has dropped. So I wanted to do some exploration of why that is. And when we look at the individual metrics, the major reason that your score has dropped is down to a drop in citation impact. So the old field-weighted citation score, it's 15% of the overall ranking, and the score has gone down last year from somewhere in the region of the high 50s down to just under 50 there. That's quite interesting to me, again, because we did see a huge rise in field-weighted citation impact back in 2019, 2020. Since then, it has steadied off, and now we've had a drop. It's not dropped back down to where it was in 2019, but there has been a slight drop there. This may be because there are specific publications, specific pieces of research, which we started to measure, which are now no longer included in our 5-year window. So that's a possible reason for that. But it does suggest that there needs to be really an additional focus on research and research quality to look to pick that up. Other than that, we do see genuinely strong performance and growth in a number of areas. For example, if we look at international co-authorship, that has been growing steadily over the last 6 years from 37, roughly 37, up to the low 60s. So some very good positive indicators alongside that. But of course, that's only 2.5% of the ranking compared to 15% of the ranking for the citation score. Now, for those of you who aren't already participating, we would love you to join. Participation in all our rankings is free. There's no charge to join. However, there is a set of eligibility criteria for the World University Rankings. You must teach at the undergraduate level, and you must publish at least 1,000 publications over a 5-year period. The biggest reason why universities who submit data don't get into the rankings is that 1,000 publication threshold. However, if you submit data and don't get into the rankings, we will still record you as a reporter. So that's a category of data provider. It gives you some visibility. It allows you to really get to grips with and understand the process of submitting data. So hopefully, as you cross that threshold in the future, you will be able to join in full. To participate, simply provide the name of the person in your institution who will be responsible for providing the data, and then we provide access to our data collection portal. This year, the data collection process for the world ranking will take place between the 8th of January and the 30th of March. And if during that time you have any questions, please do reach out to us and we'd be delighted to try and answer them. I've got about 6 or 7 minutes left, so I'm going to quickly go through 2 other key rankings that are relevant. The first one is the Sub-Saharan Africa University Rankings. These are a brand new ranking, and they are still developing as time goes past. And it's been done in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation. And what we're trying to do here is support the growth and development of universities across the region by providing consistent data and insights into performance. We've tried to choose a set of metrics which are different than the world rankings that link into both the Sustainable Development Goals and also to Agenda 2063. And we've broken this down into 5 pillars: resources and finances, access and fairness, teaching skills, student engagement, and African impact. So we are trying to look at things from a much more Africa-centric focus. This year, we had 88 ranked universities, 120 universities provided data. One of the interesting challenges for this ranking is that this does involve a survey of your students. So your students' voice is key in our understanding of your universities. Nigeria provided many universities in this ranking, for which we're exceptionally grateful. We will continue to grow and develop the metrics for the ranking over time, particularly in the first, as those of you on the Nigerian University Rankings Advisory Committee will know, building a ranking isn't a one-off process. It's something that you go back to year after year as you try and improve the things you're measuring based on the data you get back. But again, if you want to participate in this for this year, we'll be starting to collect data early next year. Please do contact us and we can set up a data provision process for you. And the final rankings I'd like to talk about are the impact rankings. Now, I love all of our rankings, but I particularly love the impact rankings. Partly because they're my personal child. These are the rankings I created in 2019. And the thing that drove me towards this is the recognition that we are in a climate catastrophe. And we need to recognize that this is a catastrophe that faces the whole world, but the effects won't be fairly distributed. The United Nations have created the Sustainable Development Goals as an imperfect but necessary framework for supporting governments and all institutions to find a roadmap out of the situation we're in. And what the impact rankings try to do is they try to take the targets in the 17 SDGs and translate those into a framework against which universities can evaluate their progress. We have 1,705 universities providing data to the impact rankings from across the world. They are a set of rankings where universities globally can perform well and can demonstrate excellence. They are not as biased towards the global north and wealth as some of the other rankings in the world are. And we're very pleased to keep it that way. We can't have a look at sustainability where universities across Africa are unable to demonstrate the excellent work they're doing. And I could spend 2 or 3 hours talking about this, but as Peter has pointed out, I only have 35 minutes. I do need to wrap up soon. So I will end by looking at how well Nigerian universities perform across each of the 17 SDGs. This is the average score. There are Nigerian universities that get into the top 100 universities in the world for many SDGs. But it's great to see here, particularly SDG 7, which is clean and affordable energy, and SDG 13, which is climate action, are 2 SDGs where universities in Nigeria perform especially strongly. So the average score there for Nigerian universities above 60 for SDG 7 is an exceptional score, and above 50 for SDG 13 is also very, very strong. We deeply appreciate universities who are willing to be assessed on this scale. It is Important to remember that when the United Nations created the SDGs as part of Agenda 2030, they explicitly stated the importance of measurement. The gold standard of measurement for universities is, of course, the voluntary review. But we hope that for those universities who are on the path towards voluntary reviews, the impact rankings are a stepping stone that allow you to do an evaluation, to choose which SDGs you want to demonstrate excellence in, and to showcase your efforts on a world stage. With that, Peter, hopefully I kept that within my 35 minutes, and that gives us time for questions.
Thank you so very much, Duncan, for that very exciting, rich, and comprehensive presentation. Thank you for squeezing in so much into your 35 minutes. Let me quickly recognize a couple of people that are in the room that, just a minute now. Yeah, okay. Binta Husseini is here with you. She's let me use it the way I want to use it, the desk officer for the Sub-Saharan African rankings. And I see Tristan there, who is the Africa regional person for Times Higher Education. We have Vice Chancellor Miranda Olarinde, Vice Chancellor of Abuad. Federal University is doing so well on the impact rankings. We have Professor JD Amin, who is a member of NURAC, Nigerian Universities Ranking Advisory Committee. Dr. Abiodun Alao of University of Ibadan. Dr. Abiodun Alao and I have been doing quite some work on ranking of OER way back. Professor Ramon Yusuf, Professor Victor Lowe of FUNAB, and of course, Professor Abdullah Adamu, who a great Vice Chancellor of National Open University of Nigeria. Now, the floor is open. The floor is open for just 1 minute now. Yes. Floor is open for persons who wish to ask questions. Well, what I suggest we do, we'll go in some batches of 4. We'll take 4 questions and we yield to Duncan to respond. And we keep going until we have exhausted our 20 minutes for question and answers. But mind you, I said at the beginning that for those of you who are not able to ask your questions because of some time limitation, you can send your questions to me. I will forward them to Duncan, and hopefully within his extremely busy schedule, he will respond. I have Adejuwon Adeneye, Abdul Kabir Hussein, and Thomas Iyonda. Please, the sequence is this: your name, your institutional affiliation, perhaps also your designation in the institution, and your question, observation. Please, no long stories, because we want to take as many as possible. Adejuwon Adeneye, Professor, you have the floor. Okay, now let me, I asked the technical people to disable everybody from, yeah, okay, allow participants to unmute, yes. Yeah, you can now carry on with unmuting yourself. Yeah.
Hello, thank you very much, sir, for the opportunity granted, sir. My name is Adejuwon Adeneye. I'm the Director for Research, Lagos State University. Considering the performances of university at the maiden edition of the Sub-Saharan Africa versus the recently released World University Ranking, the performances appear to be at complete variance, despite the fact that same set of data were submitted for ranking. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Maybe as a member of the advisory board of the Times Higher Education, International Advisory Board, I can answer that. I know Duncan will answer. He said it quite clearly that we have two different types of thrusts, maybe. So the metrics are different. The data that are being collected are almost the same, but the metrics, the measures are different. But Duncan will want to talk about that. Abdul Kabir Hussein.
Yeah, thank you, sir. My name is.
We have some interesting rule here. If we do not see you,
yes, sir.
we think please activate your video. That's the rule. And I'm going to call on Dr. Lucy Ojewale too. You have to activate your video before we allow you to speak. Now, Thomas Ruben Yanda, you have the floor because Dr. Abdulkaber is not yet activated his video. Thomas Ruben Yanda.
Thank you very much. I'm Thomas Ruben Yanda, calling from Malawi.
From Malawi.
Okay. University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and I am the acting director of quality assurance. My question is to do with the issue of student survey. Is the survey done by the universities themselves, or else is Times Higher Education which does the survey? And if it does the survey, how is it done? Is it online? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Thomas. Abdulkaber Hussein Salihu, are you ready for us? If not, we're going on to Dr. Lucy Ojewale, University of Ibadan.
I am on.
I'm coming back to you. Dr. Lucy Ojewale of Ibadan.
Okay, we'd like to speak now. Thank you very much, Professor Okebukola. So my question has to do with
now. Tell us what's your designation in the university. That's the protocol we have established. Your name, your institution, your designation. Question.
I'm sorry. My name is Dr. Lucia Ojewale. I'm a lecturer 1 in the Department of Nursing, University of Ibadan. So my question and comment has to do with the promotion, with the publication of academics in Nigerian universities. I've observed that different institutions have different criteria for promotion, and academics tend to they aim to publish in such a way that they are able to get their promotion. So I was just wondering that is it possible to have a sort of win-win criteria, if possible a uniform one for all Nigerian universities, so that academics are able to publish in such a way that Nigerian universities can score very high in Times Higher Education, using Times Higher Education criteria.
All right, thank you very much, Madam.
Okebukola
Hussein, thank you, man. Dr. Ojewale, well done. Yes, last one for this batch. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I'm Professor Okebukola Hussein Solihu from Kwara State University, Malete. I'm the acting chairman of the University Ranking Committee.
Good.
Thank you, the speaker. My question, I have very two short questions. Number one is, you mentioned that the minimum requirement for the institution to participate is to have 1,000 publications within 5 years. And this has been the major factor for many Nigerian universities not to be able to participate. Now, the question is, you said that we need to publish in the Elsevier, you based on Elsevier. So this 1,000 over 5 years, is it based only on Elsevier, or you recognize other databases? That's the question number one. Number two, in Nigeria, we have very few journals indexed in Elsevier, Scopus in particular. So say we have one or two. If we entertain our scholars to publish in this journal, that say from Kwara State University, we have a journal index in Elsevier, and we encourage our people to publish locally. Do you take this into consideration, or they must publish outside? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Duncan. There are 5 persons asking questions from Nigeria, Malawi. Take the floor, Duncan. Yeah, you are muted, Duncan. You're muted.
It's tradition that someone has to do that on every call, so I'm glad I fulfilled tradition. Firstly, can I say, yes, I should have said earlier that the particular Sub-Saharan African ranking is owned by our fantastic team member, Binta, and she has really been leading on that and doing a fantastic job.
Sure.
It's really important to us that that ranking is led by someone from Africa, and Binta is filling that role superbly. Now, on to the questions. I will try and keep my answers brief. So, Peter, you put it correctly. So the reason we see very different performances in the Sub-Saharan African ranking, the impact ranking, and the World University ranking is because we're trying to measure different things. There's no particular reason why we would expect the very strongest research universities to necessarily be good at teaching, for example. Some of them are. There's no doubt about that. But for a lot of them, they get great students in any case, and actually great students are easy to teach. So we have to recognize that there are different university missions and we need to measure those appropriately. So that's why we see variance, or at least one of the reasons why we see that variance. We had a great question on the student survey. Binta, would you like to answer this, or are you happy for me to?
Let's hear the voice of Binta.
Let's indeed. So
yeah.
The question was, how do we run our student survey for the Sub-Saharan African ranking?
Yeah, and I remember he asking if it was from the universities or if it was online. So what we do is, thank you so much for that question, and thank you so much for having me here as well. Good afternoon, everyone. Just like I was introduced, I am the data owner for the Sub-Saharan African ranking. So we actually ask universities to distribute a link to their students. So we ask universities to actually share the platform to their students to be able to access that link and fill the student survey. So it's actually online. It's not not paper-based, so it's online, and we provide the platform for the universities to distribute it to their students, and it comes directly from the students to us. It doesn't go through the universities. I hope I've been able to answer that question. Duncan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Binta. Now, interesting question about promotion. Yes, publishing is always an interesting thing to think about because it has many roles. So absolutely, the first reason why you're publishing your research is because you've done great research and you want to get it out into the world so that people can learn from it and it can have an impact and advance knowledge. But we have to recognize that publication also plays a critical role in terms of how your colleagues will assess your career and potentially promote you. And these are sometimes in tension. There is that tension between what you might feel is right and what you might feel is necessary to advance your career. To be honest, there's not a lot we can directly do about that. But what we can do is try and encourage types of measurement which give different perspectives on research publication. And that's why we've broadened those calculations. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the DORA resolution, to be clear here, we're not advocating that we use these measures to understand individual academics. That's not what this is about. This is about assessing the university as a whole, because when we look at individual academics, it can get quite challenging. But that's why we try and do it. I think if we could, one of the things I like about the influence measure actually is it gives us a very different way of understanding the impact of your research, not just the immediate impact, but the much longer frame impact, which I think is really critical to understand how effective your research is being. Now, we then had two questions looking at, again, at publications, but this case looking at where we get our data from. Now, just to be clear, Elsevier's Scopus database contains information from over 5,000 different publishers. So it's not just articles that are published in Elsevier journals, it's much broader than that. And Elsevier are continually trying to expand the number of journals, books, book series that are included in Scopus. They have an independent committee whose job it is to assess those. And if you're aware of some brilliant research journals in Nigeria which aren't currently indexed in Scopus, please do push those on to Elsevier because they will be looking for good examples which can be added. Now, there are some criteria there. The publication can be in multiple languages, but the summary of the article, the précis, has to be in English. And the citation links have to be in the Roman alphabet. But other than that, those are the main criteria, and of course, quality. Now, the 1,000 article limit is actually something that is under review. The reason we've had to have that limit in there is a statistical one, which is that think of it as a sample problem. When the size of the number of publications drops for an institution, those measures of citation performance tend to move about a lot from year to year. And so we hope that by moving from a single measure to 4 measures, we'll be able to have a much more stable understanding of performance, and that over time that will allow us to reduce that threshold, which will in turn allow more universities to participate.
Yeah, all done. Thank you, Duncan. All done. We have 3 hands up, and those are the only 3 we will be able to take as the final round. Before I take them on, I'd like to recognize the presence in the room of some juggernauts that are causing this room to shake. You know, given Professor Mosto Onuoha, former chair president of Nigeria Academy of Science, Professor Kabiru Akinyemi, Professor Rosemary Opasi, the director of academic planning of Benson Idahosa University, Professor Joshua Obaleye of University of Ilorin, Professor S.J. Odewumi.
Peter,
yes?
Peter, we also have Professor Amalu at the bottom, who has raised his actual hand rather than...
Okay, I will take him. I'll take him. Professor Folisha Okebukola, Vice Chancellor Thomas Adewumi University, Professor Majia, and of course we have, as I introduced him earlier, the Deputy Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission, Professor Saliu, who is the Secretary of NURAC. He's going to give the vote of thanks as we close. Professor Chibueze Ogbona, you have the floor. Dr. Tunde Lawal, Professor Eric Chikweru Amadi, and last but not the least, hey, Duncan, you said somebody raised it. Oh, Professor Amadi has raised the electronic hand now, which is very nice. With the last will be Professor Ajit Kumar, Vice Chancellor Skyline. Please make it brief. Take the floor, Professor Ogbona.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Duncan. I was just wondering whether in the ranking there's any provision for the setting for learning and research, the ambience in terms of environment, particularly considering the SDGs and the climate challenge. Don't you think there should be such a thing to encourage institutions to provide an enabling environmental setting for research and teaching? Thank you.
Brilliant question, Professor Bona. Where are you based and what's your designation?
Sorry, sir. I'm the current Dean, School of Environmental Sciences, Babcock University,
Wonderful.
Nigeria.
Thank you. Professor Tunde Lawal, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Dr. Tunde Lawal, an associate professor from Lagos State University of Education. I'm currently the Director of Academic Planning and Quality Assurance. My question is, while Duncan was presenting, he made mention of some parameters for world university ranking, like you must teach undergraduate level, you must have 1,000 publications over 5 years and 150 publications in a year. My question is, what is the implication of these parameters for a university like ours that one could call neophyte universities? We are just about 2 years old.
All right. Thank you, Professor Tunde Lawal. No time more for you. Professor Amadi, take the floor.
Oh, thank you so much. I am Professor Eric Amadi, Director of Quality Assurance University of Nigeria. My question is on these 1,000 publications per annum. Now, if you look at our growth chain from assistant lecturer to professor, we have 18 years to stay in university. Now, if you divide 18 years times 5, it will be about 3.6. Now, this criteria, wouldn't it set some elitist barrier against people in the profession to attain to this professional qualification? That's my question.
Thank you so very much, sir, Professor Eric Amadi. Last but not least, Vice Chancellor Skyline, Professor Ajit Kumar. Ask your question. I've introduced you, so you need to just go and ask your question.
My question, Mr. Duncan, is about patents. So just wanted to confirm, because patents, any patent registered with any country is acceptable, or do you have any conditions on the patents that are considered in the ranking? Because, you know, people go to do research in different countries, and as part of the research, they may be doing patents in different parts of the world. So just wanted to confirm on that, how patents will be considered.
I shall do that. And
thank you. Duncan, you have about 3 minutes to...
okay, Peter, if I could indulge you briefly. Professor Amalu, I think you had your hand up as well. If you can be very brief with a question.
Yeah, where's Professor Amalu? I'm not able to see him. Professor Amalu, is there Professor Amalu somewhere? Professor Amadi, and I've recognized him.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Uche Amalu is my name, Professor, University of Calabar. Now, how do you measure student satisfaction and student environment?
Good question.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. So I'm actually going to turn back to Binta, if Binta is still on the call. Binta, could you briefly talk to the questions we ask students, particularly around ambience or environment and around satisfaction?
Yeah, I can. Thank you for that question. We actually have a metrics in the Sub-Saharan African University ranking called the facilities. And it's drawn from 2 questions we ask directly to students about their satisfaction and about their accommodation. So we ask firstly if the university provides facilities, resources that would be able to provide a good learning environment for the student. So that's the summary of that question. And then secondly, we ask if the university provides accommodation or amenities that are up to standard or that are suitable for the student's time in the university. So those are the 2 specific questions that have to do with the environment and that have to do with if the university is providing like laboratories or facilities that are useful for the learning environment. And then we also ask directly if the student is satisfied, if they're willing to recommend their university to others. So that specific question actually focuses on how satisfied they are with the university as a whole and how they're willing to recommend that to their university to other students or to others. So over to you, Duncan. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you very much. Also, in the impact rankings, although we don't directly ask students for their opinions, we do have a number of measures, particularly in SDG 4, 5, and 10. So that's quality education, gender equality, and reduced inequalities, that look at how well your universities work to making sure they're open to people from all backgrounds and that you're truly expanding the access to higher education. Very briefly running through some of the other questions. Patents, we use data from the World Patent Office, from the European Patent Office, the US Patent Office, the Chinese Patent Office, and one other at the moment, although that is expanding over time. So that captures a lot of patents. It doesn't capture everything, but it gets a large, most people will submit patents to one or more of those others, as well as their local patent office. In terms of the young universities, yes, it's tough for young universities because to get to that 1,000 publication threshold takes time and energy and a lot of really brave and bold leadership. It is not a straightforward thing to do. That's one of the reasons why we do want to bring that threshold down over time. And I'm afraid I can't remember the final question, which was something about, sorry, Professor Amadi, I think it was your question.
No, Professor Amali's question, Amalu, is, you have answered, Professor Amadi. You have answered it. That has to do.
Thank you, Duncan, and thank you, Professor Okebukola.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, right. I think that's it. To now invite the Secretary of NURAC, Deputy Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission, to move a vote of thanks on our behalf for the team from Times Higher Education to get Duncan to be able to oblige us. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I want to personally appreciate you. I recall that it was when we were having the last International Advisory Board meeting that the chairs of Times Higher Education World University Ranking said, "Outside, Duncan, can you please come?" And he said, yes, it was automatic. So I personally appreciate your comment. Professor Muhammad Yauza Bello, former Vice Chancellor of Bayero University, Kano, who is here, is a member of NURAC. I'd like him to know that Binta Hussein is a proud product of Bayero University, Kano. Over to you, Professor Noe Salu, for a brief vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me, on behalf of the Nigerian Universities Ranking Advisory Committee, say a very big thank you to Duncan for finding time out of his very busy schedule to actually share his experience with us. Just like the chairman mentioned, getting you is like getting the camel passed through the needle's eye. But we are very grateful that we eventually made it for this meeting, and we are able to learn a lot from you. We are also very grateful to Binta Husseini, and we are very proud of you. I mean, you are our very good ambassador out there, and I will continue to look forward to your contribution to the development of the Nigerian university system. I cannot also but express deep appreciation to our chairman, distinguished Professor Okebukola, for the wonderful job he's been doing in building up this system. That's it, the Nigerian university system. I mean, this is like when you circulated in the call for this meeting, I mean, it's the first in the series of many other seminars that will come between, with the Times Higher Education. I will thank you for always looking for the good of the system. And our prayers that God will reward your labor of love. Amen. We also want to say a very big thank you to our vice chancellors, former vice chancellors, and our university dons, all dotted in this meeting. We thank you for your interest in also moving the system forward. Later we'll talk about ranking. Whichever way you look at it, whichever way or whatever people have said about ranking, ranking has a way of impacting on people having a culture of quality. Exactly. And I believe that at the end of the day, our system will be the better for it. On this note, I want to say a very big thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next meeting on ranking. Do have a very good evening. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor Noel Biodun Saliu. Before we leave, I have a few announcements. Number one is that, as Duncan has promised, the PowerPoint file that he used for this meeting will be sent to me, and I will send to you all. The second is that we have a recording of this session. We will send that recording, the link, to you all. Number three is that there will be a series of workshops. We'll look at, we'll x-ray ourselves. We'll do a gap analysis. You know, Duncan has told us where we're strong and has told us where we're weak. So we're going to be working hard towards bridging the gap between where we are now and where we should be. And there'll be a series of workshops leading to January 8th, when the door, Duncan has the key in his pocket to open the door for us to be registered. Thank you one and all, and all the very best. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Peter. And
Bye-bye.
If I can just finally say, if you are interested in submitting to the impact rankings, please do reach out to us now. That data collection is open. But once more, thank you to Peter and to all of you for coming along today and listening.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.